Thank you. So our last speaker is Nijimie Dzurinko, a poet, youth worker, and movement strategist based in Philadelphia. She was the longtime director of the Philadelphia Student Union, engaging young leaders at some of our city's most underfunded schools in the fight for quality public education. She helped found the Media Mobilizing Project, which is the media arm of a network of groups fighting for housing, education, and worker rights. And most recently, she's a founder of Put People First PA, a statewide grassroots, multi-issue, base-building organization uniting people across traditional divides in the state of Pennsylvania. Please give it up to Lisa.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you. Really, really honored to be here. I took a red eye from San Francisco, even though I live here, this morning, so I could be here with you, actually. And I want to thank Ms. Gwen for calling us together as one people in the beginning. I want to thank Jamala for asking us to keep rethinking our strategy and our analysis. I want to thank Bob for his courage and his humor in opening up a difficult conversation. I want to thank Khalil for taking us through some really important people in Philly history, and then on a lot of twists and turns about some information we didn't know, but always managing to bring it back to the issue of development and land, right? I want to thank the Point Breeze Organizing Committee for organizing this event, everyone in the room for taking the time to be here, and last but not least, I want to thank my partner, my fiance, who's sitting right up here in the front, for driving me here this morning because I was exhausted, and because he remembers, he was born and raised in South Philly, and he remembers when 21st and Bainbridge was still a Black community. So before I start, I just want to call up the spirit. We're calling up different spirits of folks who have inspired us in this work, and every time I talk about land and development, I think of Rosemary Kubas, who some of you may know and some may not know. I got the honor of knowing her before she passed away. She was a lifelong resident of North Philadelphia, right around the Norris Square neighborhood. And she's someone who created something called the Community Leadership Institute, which really reminds me a lot of what you're doing here in Point Breeze, which is building up leadership, right? Like Osili talked about in the beginning of the day. And when there was a whole block of homes that were actually demolished on Bodine Street in North Philadelphia through eminent domain. The city used eminent domain. They took the houses, they demolished them. They said, well, we're going to develop something here. I don't remember what the promise was, but there was some promise of some kind of development that never happened. And to this day, you can go to Bodine. You can see a whole block of grass, right? And based upon that situation, she galvanized many, many people in the community to start fighting against eminent domain and winning people's right to stay in their homes, even homes that were taken over through eminent domain. She won and got those reversed, and the community got those reversed so that they could remain in their homes. So every time I come and think about these kinds of struggles, I always think about Rosemary. So who am I? I'm the daughter of a Black father and a mother who is Arab and white. Although I've lived in West Philadelphia for over 20 years, I'm not originally from here. Although Khalil and I were talking and he said, you're okay, you're an honorary Philadelphian. I know they say this is a place that you're only from if you were born and raised here, and I respect that. I grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania, and I know firsthand that the problems and the issues that we have in big cities, we also have in towns. They're just on a smaller scale. I was raised by my grandparents. My grandmother used to say that my mother brought me to her when I was 10 days old. My face was all red because we had been in the sun. And she thought, I can't raise another baby, because she had already raised 5 children of her own. And what led my mother to do this? Well, my father had just been killed. My mother likes to say that he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but of course there's a lot more to it than that. My grandmother's words were foreshadowing because they couldn't financially raise another baby. My grandfather was a steel worker, and by the time I came along, the mills were closing down. My grandparents were on a fixed income. I remember my grandparents fighting about everything from the bills to daffodils. And we grew some of our own food, and yes, I ate government cheese. I remember going behind the old sectional couch in our living room to escape into my own world and get away from the stress and the chaos and the unpredictable behavior that sometimes found its target in me. At the age of 5, I remember thinking, where did I come from? Strange thought for a little kid, I guess, but life didn't look as bad to me as it did to my grandparents. And I couldn't see how I came from these people. And I thought, something is wrong with my grandparents. Something is going on that I don't understand. It's not my fault, but it's not their fault either. And for some reason that I definitely credit to Providence, I made a choice in how to think about that situation. And that's deeply connected to the work I do now. My whole life, I've been trying to understand the root causes behind what's going on in our lives. Not just the symptoms that play out in the ways that we interact with each other. And then as now, I don't blame us for what we're facing, but I do believe we have a choice in how we respond to our situation. And I know that we share that value in this room today. That's the reason why I wanted to be here in Point Breeze today. The values that allowed you to make the choice to come together today and engage because of the love and commitment and pride that you have in your community. The commitment and faith that you showed in pounding the pavement and door knocking to elect our president. Many people in the room did that. Give yourselves a hand. When members and youth from Asian Americans United and One Love Movement go out and door knock with Josh and J-Rock from the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project to collect signatures to change the PA law that tries youth as adults. The commitment and perseverance, yes, please. The commitment and perseverance of Michael Bell, who was here earlier but I think left, and United Communities and so many others that are working to enact a land bank that will prioritize land use for affordable housing, green space, and small businesses in this city and in this community. The commitment of the students, parents, teachers, and workers in PCAPS and Unite Here who have marched, gotten arrested, and even gone on a hunger strike for our public schools. Because the reality is that we are good people. The other day I had this realization, that when regular people make bad decisions, we don't really hurt anyone but ourselves, or maybe the people who are closest to us, or our children. But when the honchos on Wall Street, or at the School Reform Commission, or in the governor's office, or even in our city government make bad decisions, their decisions can hurt hundreds, or thousands, or even millions of people. But they're still telling us that we're the ones who are bad people. Does that make any sense? No, it's a lie. That there's something wrong with us. So we have the choice to believe in ourselves despite the challenges that we face. To believe that we can change things if we come together. Because, as we're saying today, and when we talk about the unfinished business of the civil rights movement with all of our speakers, that's the only thing that's ever made a difference, right? Isn't that what the civil rights movement teaches us? Yes. That despite rising property taxes, our schools closing, no work, and life in many ways getting harder instead of easier for these next generations, we have the choice to take a moment right now and imagine what would have happened if King hadn't been assassinated? What would have happened if Malcolm X hadn't been assassinated? What would have happened if Fred Hampton hadn't been assassinated? What kind of world would we be living in? If we had our economic and human rights that King called for at the end of his life. When he made the shift from civil rights to human rights, and after the white liberals that had been the champions of the civil rights movement abandoned him. When 3,000 blacks, Chicanos, Native Americans, and poor whites set up a tent city in the nation's capital, calling for a meaningful job at a living wage, or a secure and adequate income for those unable to find or do a job, access to capital, and the ability for regular people to have a voice in government. Imagine what our society would be like right now if we had our human rights. And I want to ask you, what would our society be like right now if we had our human rights?
Bliss.
Bliss? Just?
Quality education.
Quality education? Yes. Good food for everyone? What else? Healthcare for everyone?
Equal opportunity to continue to struggle.
An equal opportunity to continue to struggle? What else? Jobs, not jail. We would be what Martin Luther King wanted us to be. Thank you. So all the people that we're lifting up and remembering today, when they really started to challenge the roots of power, they broke out of their lanes. They made a choice. King said, "The dispossessed of this nation, the poor, both white and Negro, live in a cruelly unjust society. They must organize against the injustice, not against the lives of the persons who are their fellow citizens, but against the structures through which the society is refusing to take means which have been called for and which are at hand to lift the load of poverty. There are millions of poor people in this country who have little or even nothing to lose. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life." So I feel that new and unsettling force in this room today. And I think that that new and unsettling force is what we're being called to do when we think about finishing the unfinished business of the civil rights movement. So, lest we be faced with these cruel injustices that are growing by the hour, pawns in a game where our only value is as consumers or workers, and there is no work, so we have no money to spend. So why do we need to be educated when we can work for free in the prisons? 75% of Pennsylvania school districts will make cuts to staff and educational programs in the 2013-2014 school year. That's across the state of Pennsylvania. For every one job in Pennsylvania, 3 people are looking for a job. And 4 more people who have a job are looking for more work. So I think we're moving toward a society where the poor have no rights the rich are bound to respect. And I fear that this is our future if we don't believe in ourselves and come together to create a different future, one where we have the right to education, to healthcare, to housing, to transportation, to food, to a livable income, not because a piece of paper says so, not if the market allows it, but because we are human beings. And I think that we have that new and unsettling force now. I don't think we have to wait. I don't even think we have to wait till 2042.
That's right.
I think we can look out from here, across this neighborhood, across the city of Philadelphia, and even across the state of Pennsylvania, see a lot of people who don't have the things that we need. And if we can be helped to take power together, then we can be that new and unsettling force that King called for at the end of his life. One in which this city, this state, this country, this richest country in the world, puts people first. Thank you.